Welcome children. Take out your history book. Chapter 9 Economic Policies of the British. Today's topic Impact of British Policy on Indian Industries and Trade. Indian handicrafts, ceramic wares, blue pottery, metalwork, cotton products and other textiles had dominated the international market for several centuries. Now since several centuries, Indian handicrafts, ceramic wares, blue pottery, metalworks, cotton products and even other textiles, they have dominated this international market for several centuries. The finer varieties of cotton were sent to distant places like Persia and Central Asia by land and sea routes. Now, the finer quality varieties of cotton which were produced in India, they were sent to went to very far off places, that is Persia and Central Asia, either by land or by sea routes. The medieval king in India were great patrons of Indian handicrafts and products. Now, medieval kings in India, they were very much patrons, means they loved, they appreciated the Indian handicrafts and even the products. Dhaka was known for muslin. Now, Dhaka, it was known for muslin. Banaras, which is presently called Varanasi, it was known for silk. Moradabad for brassware. Kashmir for shawls and carpet weaving, and Rajasthan for miniature painting. Now see, medieval they were great patrons of Indian handicrafts and even their products. Now Dhaka, it was famous for muslin. Banaras, which is presently called Varanasi, it was famous for silk. Moradabad for brassware. Kashmir for shawls and carpet weaving, and Rajasthan for miniature painting. However, with the arrival of the East India Company, the traditional structure of the Indian economy began to collapse. Now, when this East India Company arrived in India, the traditional structure of Indian economy, it began to collapse. The Indian traders and merchants started losing control over trade activities as they could not compete with the European traders. Now, Indian businessmen and merchants, what they happened, they started to lose control over this business activities as they could not compete with European traders. The French, the Dutch, the Portuguese competed amongst each other to purchase woven cloth at the cheapest. Now this French, the Dutch and the Portuguese, they used to compete with each other because they wanted to purchase woven cloths at the cheapest price. As the British East India Company established political power, the competitors were eliminated and trade came to be slowly controlled by the East India Company. Now, the British India Company, what they did, they came as a trader, but they established their political power, and the competitors the competitors, they were eliminated, and the trade, what happened, it went in the hands of the East India Company. The exploitation of the weavers grew as the company demanded more produce in a short period of time, and even weaver work at extremely low wages. Now this exploitation of the weaver, what happened, it grew very large because the company now demanded they demanded to produce more in a shorter period of time, and what they made the weaver to work in an extremely low wage. Not just the weavers, but the destruction of among all the traders, Indian industries were taking. Not only the weavers, but the destruction of all the traditional Indian industries which were taking place during the 18th and the 19th century because of British commercial policy. The reason was that because of this British commercial policy. This process has been described as deindustrialization as opposed to industrialization by historians. Now this process, it was called the deindustrialization because it was opposed to industrialization by historians. In the 18th century, British and several other European companies adopted protectionist policies that imposed very high tariffs on the Indian textile which were not in great demand, Now during the 18th century, what happened? British and several other European countries, what they adopted to protectionist policies because and they imposed some very high tariffs on this Indian textile which were in great demand. Naturally, the overseas market for Indian textile shrank rapidly. Naturally, what happened? This overseas market for Indian textile, what happened? It shrank very quickly. Britain needed a market for its machine-made goods, and hence brought in huge quantities to sell in the Indian market. Now, Britain, what they needed one market for its machine-made goods, and even they brought some huge quantities to sell the Indian market. The cloth that was produced by factories in Britain and were much cheaper, and the Indian handloom industries could not compete with them. Now, cloth which were produced by the factories, that means which were produced in the British factories, they were much cheaper, and the Indian handloom industry, what happened? This cannot compete with them. The main focus of the company was to acquire raw materials for their factories rather than encouraging Indian traditional industry. Now, main focus of the company, what was it? It was to acquire raw materials, that is for the factories, rather than to encourage the India's traditional industries. With the establishment of the British Empire in India, the Indian ruling dynasty collapsed and the regional courts disappeared. Now, when the British Empire established in India, what happened? The Indian ruling industry, it got collapsed, and the regional court also got disappeared. This disparaged the artisans and craftsmen loyal to patronage and led to the further decline of the traditional Indian industry. Now, what it deprived this artisan? This deprived the artisans and even the craftsmen of the loyal patronage. What happened? They further declined the traditional Indian industry. The large British population in India and new emergent Indian middle class were not keen on Indian. Now, the large British population living in India and even the newly emergent Indian middle class, they were not so keen. Means that they were not so interested in Indian goods. They preferred goods and articles made in and imported from India. Now, they wanted the article, that means they gave importance to the goods and articles which were made in and imported from Britain. Thus, even the domestic market for Indian artisan began to shrink. Now, and for this, what happened? The domestic market for Indian artisan started shrinking. Textile industries, particularly cotton textiles, saw a declining trend. It was not until 1851. Now, what happened? Textile industry, particularly the cotton textile, it saw a declining trend. It was not until 1851 that the first Indian-owned cotton mill was set up in Bombay by a Parsi business. Now what happened? That this Indian-owned cotton mill, it was set up. Where it was set up? It was set up in Bombay, and by whom? That was by a Parsi businessman. India underwent a severe change. Now, India, what happened? It went a severe change. It transformed from a major exporter of textiles to a major importer of the British factory-made textile. Now, what happened? It transformed this big exporter of textile, that is, to a major importer of the British factories which made textile. Thus, the economic policies of the British were exploited by nature and deeply affected Indian agriculture and industry. And so, the economic policies of the British, they were exploited by nature and they deeply affected the Indian agriculture and industry. Now, take out your diary, write history chapter 9, that is topic, that is impact of new land revenue system, explain, homework, revise it. And with this, I am ending my today's class.